them. And another important thing is that you kind of get over yourself while you're saying it. You're not trying to infuse yourself with the idea of this affirmation. You're simply putting your body in the shape of these words, which puts our body in the shape of this feeling. And this set of affirmations that Kato gave me at that time have been probably the most valuable thing that I've ever learned in my whole life. So I will invite you to say them after me. I don't know if you can hear, but I'm really nervous. This is the way I talk to people. It makes me very nervous. So the idea of stepping into this place of affirmation is something that is a tool that, in Kato's words, would help me make order out of the chaos that is this Zoom meeting in front of me. If I'm a little scared that I'm going to fall on my face, or that my voice is going to stop working entirely, or that I'll say something that is completely off base. The organization of my movements, the organization of my words, the organization of my thoughts, just for these few minutes is so powerful a tool. You can almost not fight against it. So without further ado, I invite you to join me in these affirmations. I'll say it and you can respond. I am young. I am whole. I am perfect. I am strong. I am powerful. I am loving. I am harmonious. And I am happy. I love myself and I love life. As I said, you don't have to believe it. And I remember for probably the first year that I used this tool, I argued with every single one of those. And so Kato was very pragmatic. She recommended, again, don't get hung up on what the words mean. Don't get hung up on whether it's, kind of woo-woo magic, or whether you want to step into that space or not right now. Simply do it. And she had me do it 10 times in a row. So I would be brushing my teeth and I would be saying these affirmations. So I'll offer them to you one more time and you can join me if you like. I am young. I am whole. I am perfect. I am strong. I am powerful. I am loving. I am harmonious. And I am happy. I love myself and I love life. So one of the things that I talked about last week was stepping into another thing that Kato gave me, stepping into a bubble of peace. And several people have mentioned it to me in this past week as something that's incredibly valuable. So I'll just also invite you to do that again. The idea is that the virus is still doing its job. Our administration is still doing whatever it is that they're going to do to help us get through or not get through this next few weeks. Winter is coming. Some people don't have enough food to eat. I'm having to move out of my house for a couple of weeks while somebody knocks down walls in it. There's a lot of anxiety in the world. And the most value that I can get out of a moment of sharing music with people is to set it aside and step into a place that doesn't allow that. Don't worry, that stuff will still be there when you step out again. But I, again, invite you to create around yourself. This is the way Kato put it. Create a bubble of peace that completely surrounds you. And just for the time that you're here, all the objections that you might have, all of the yes, but responses that you might have, all of the challenges that are true and are part of your response are going to wait outside that bubble for you. So those are the two ways that I'd like to start. And then we're going to just do another short miming like we did last week. And it'll be a very short version. You're welcome to use your viola if you like. I'm afraid I forgot to write out the music for you this time, but I kind of think you might know this song. So if you would sing along with me and find the pulse. There's a wave coming from the ocean a ways away, and it's coming towards me. And when it gets here, I'm going to jump on that pulse. And this wave is going about like this. La, 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 la. Oh, that's so lovely. Here's another movement that is common in Kato's practice. You can find a balance as though you're sitting in a warm swimming pool and you have these little floaties on. I think Jody had this idea. You have your floaties and your hands are just kind of balanced on the water. And we're going to go back and forth and sing our song. La 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 la. La 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 la. That's lovely. When I was with her, Kato called that flip flop. Now we're going to coordinate the left hand, and this is a part where I'm hoping that you will be able to join me, and I apologize again for not having the music for you to put in front of you. We're going to play in G major. So we're going to start on the D string. So we start with an open D string, and then as I play each of the notes, let me see which one is easier to see. This one? This one. Yeah. So I will have my fingers create the shape of this music, and as I sing it to myself. And there was another thing about that. Okay, I can't remember what it was. So here we go. And again, the pulse is going to come from, maybe it's in Miami and it's on its way up here. The pulse is coming, and we can join it, and we'll go la 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 la. And what I'm teaching my hand in that is very specifically, I'm in G major, so that there is a whole step between the open string and my first finger on the D string, between my first finger and my second finger. So you see there's some space there. And then these two fingers are close together because they're a half step. We aren't going to play the fourth finger in this piece, so I'm not going to even worry about it. But if we did, it would also have a space because it has a whole step there. So on both the D string and the G string in this piece, we're in G major, which means that if I want to think about, oh, I wonder what this piece is like when I'm standing in line at the grocery store, this is what this piece is like. That's all my hand has to do. We're going to now sing. This is going to be tricky. I'm going to sing the note names, and I will use letters. You can use solfege if you like. You can use la-la if you like. Again, I'm going to really notice when I'm playing on the D string, when I'm playing on the G string, and when I'm playing on the A string. Now, my hand doesn't make a lot of shift from one place to the next, but that's what I'm going to be concentrating on now. I'm going to sing the names of the notes to my hand, so my hand really learns these notes. Here comes the pulse. D, G, D, G, D, G, D, D, G, D, G, B, A, G, F, E, E, D, G, D, B, C, D, G, D, G, E, D, C, B, A, G. That's that. Let's do a little right hand miming just because I like the choreography of this song. I'm going to slur 4 notes, dee, da, da, and then 4 notes back, da, 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 and then 2 notes, da, 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 da. And so that you have that whoop, that little B at the top is on a nice up bow. So there's a feeling of legato here. And you'll notice that my hand will start on the D string. So imagining that if my viola were here, I'd be playing on the level of the D string. And then I'll dip over to the G string for one little bit. Dip over D, G, D, G, D, and then back again. So you have this little dip that your bow is following on this. So notice what the choreography does as we mime the right arm of this piece. Here comes the pulse. La, 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 la. La 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 la. And I'm noticing myself that without the notes in front of me and trying to do this without the music in front of me, it's much more complicated to remember that it's a simple little dip over to the G string, a simple dip over to the A string, and then most of this is on the D string. So that's what we're teaching ourselves by miming. If you'd like to play the open strings, I'm going to try to sing the song, play the open strings, and join me if you like. Here comes the wave. La, la, la. Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so out of tune. I will find a new D. Okay. Here comes the wave. La 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 la. Want to try playing the music? In honor of that lovely man, Alex Trebek, who gave all of us such great fun all of these years. Here comes the wave. That was lovely. I hope you're laughing. I'm laughing, I'm smiling. That's the whole point of miming, is to take the worry out of all the different things that we do when we play an instrument and break it down into its smallest pieces, and behind that, always be joyful. So that's what I'd like to share with you today. Now, Jeananne, I think, is going to be speaking now a little bit about the left hand, and I'm going to mute myself and turn it over to Jeananne.
Okay, hello everybody. So nice to be here again, and I just want to get right to the point and kind of give you a little brief thing about how I met Kato. I met Kato as I was a preteen. I'm figuring it was about 1978 or 79. I went to summer workshops and then also went to study with her in Oxford. A lot of what I want to talk about today, I want to come to expand on what Patty was talking about last week with the bubble. And if we can if everybody could stand up, I just want to do a little bit of a thing that that will expand into the bubble. So I was explaining to Patty and David the other day that my high school teacher went to Kato's workshop, and that's how I met Kato. And she went over to her bookshelf one lesson, and she said, "This is how I was really reluctant to pulse at all, because I was always taught to not move anything from the waist down. You know, you're playing up here. I was taught to just play with your upper body. So when we had to talk about pulsing, it was really tricky for me, and I was very I was very self-conscious. So she went over and she grabbed a book and she showed me this illustration of the solar plexus being our center. And if everybody could kind of go to their solar plexus area, and then I want you to imagine making a nice circle, and with it, make sure your body is going, your bubble is getting bigger and bigger, so it's becoming quite graceful. And that you notice that how you are standing, you probably will be feeling your heels a lot. And you should also feel like your knees are just going in this round motion. And that's really what we want to think about with our bubble and our motions in playing. And so I was thinking about this earlier, and I think I would call this exercise the yummy tummy. And because I was thinking of, kind of rubbing a tummy, and I went to get steamed buns earlier. So that was kind of thinking about my yummy tummy eating the buns. And if you go backwards too, if you go the other way, you can then get smaller and smaller. And that's what's going to change the body, helping the whole body to encompass this pulse that we need to have in our music making. And as we start talking, I'm going to talk about the left hand, I promise. I was thinking about, in talking about the left hand, we really need to address the balance as a whole with our body and our instrument. And that Kato taught the tripod idea between our two legs and our spine, making kind of a riding stick for our pulse. So you could incorporate that idea, and also the solar plexus being in that circular motion. But I was also thinking we do have a tripod effect for our balance of our body and our instrument also that we have to address. We have that constant balance between the shoulder, the head, and the left hand. And if they can work together, then we can really have a free left hand and a free head, and we can talk and speak and sing while we play. And often my students ask me, well, do you really sing while you play the violin? And I'm mostly a violinist. And I say, yes, I have worked up to be able to do that. And there are very few performers that I've seen do that, mostly in the bluegrass world. But it is a very difficult thing. And it stumps me that it's so different from playing the piano and singing, or playing the guitar and singing. And some of that was because of hearing that different pitch right here, very close to our ear, and then working on singing another pitch. But it's that just being able to do that has helped me immensely in harmonizing and things of that sort. So if we can think of that, if we can take our right hands and just go over our shoulder as if we're just draping our hand over here. And that's where our violin is really going to sit, and think about that collarbone being like our violin shelf. Now our head, Kato described this in her books in this manner. And I read this again about a year ago, and it really helps in how we can set our head onto our instrument, and there, on our shoulder, and then our head just rests there. How she described it was that you would be in a room, in a party, and you're looking over the room to find who you know, or your husband, or your family. And once you find them, you say, oh, there they are. And your head is perfect for playing. We don't have to turn it this way, or turn it this way, or turn it this way. It's just there. And then we have that beautiful measurement from our collarbone to our jawbone that Kato talked about so much. That was what she would call measure. She'd say measure, measure. So we'd have this measuring here, measure, and take that into our body into measure. And then if we have that, then we can do, Kato has an exercise called the Flying Violin, which we could go over at another session, but I want to get on to other things too. But if we can take this, then we come from the body of the instrument and we slide our left hand here, and it is movable. Now, as a child, having to think about holding the violin mostly with my shoulder coming up, and later on, as I got more and more nervous, my head would do it. But if I have that balance with my body, my left hand is free to move. But I must say that what's very, very important is for everybody to have the correct balance with your shoulder rest. That will really be magical. But and I know that some of us play Baroque instruments. I would not be able to play without the shoulder rest if I didn't know of this balance. So in thinking about the left hand, that's a really important thing to be thinking about, that tripod idea. So if we can, next I want everybody to set your instrument down. And Patty was talking about this motion here, and I was holding up a picture of Kato that I have. This is how she would demonstrate our flying, winging arms to be able to play. And she would come to that from a flip-flop, what she called the flip-flop exercise. So if everybody can come and imagine you're just giving a loved one a hug around the shoulders, and that you land on their shoulders and you don't have it like that. And you don't have it so light and wimpy, like a wimpy handshake. So this comes around this way. And then we can fly back and forth. Now, if you can take that idea and come across your heart with your right hand this way. Now take your left hand and cover your other hand. Now swing out, and I'm going to turn a little bit so people can see me. Swing out as if you're just doing this nice, graceful what I call a conductor swing. That the conductor would, here they are, they're ready, and then they come in this way. Nick McGeegan is beautiful at it. So if you can think of that conductor swing and then come up to that spot where your left hand is covering your right. And go out again and watch as I do this, because I want you to do this in a sequence. So we start from here, and then we swing our arms out. And I think you know how I'm swinging. So I'm going to show you from the front view. So swinging out this way, and then I come a little bit less, but my arms my hands just kind of dropping down. And then I do it again, and I come out a little bit less. And as I'm here now, there's where my instrument is going to balance. Okay, so think about that. And the swing, remember, just as if we're swinging our right arm, which David will be talking about, we're not going to be swinging in this way and doing this, or doing this and holding that right arm or that right hand down. And that is and we can do it with a pencil, with students, we can do that with a pencil and have that mimic the bow as they get used to balancing the bow. And so those are a couple of things in just expanding that bubble kind of idea that Patty was talking about. Now, I'm so glad David is here presenting with us, and I'm so glad also to see Michelle, because I need to tell you all about a couple of stories that kind of influence things in expanding Kato's teachings. Michelle and I studied with Kato at the same time, and often Michelle would have her lesson and we'd be doing duets, and we'd go off together, and we'd take the bus down to downtown Oxford. And one day Michelle was sitting on the bus, and I watched her she was staring, her hand was resting on her leg, and she was staring at her hand. And I just kept looking over at her, and she did it for the longest time. It wasn't like something was on her hand or she was just wondering about something. She was really studying what that hand was. And Kato kept saying to us, darlings, you play with your hand. You don't play with a thumb and 4 fingers. You need to send the music with your hand. So I believe I said to Michelle, well, so what are you doing? She said, I'm looking at my hand. And she said, I noticed how that shape, I'm just resting on my leg, Jeananne, and look at that. Now, if everybody can grab their cup, does everybody have a cup or a glass? Okay, now with your left hand, just imagine you're going to take a drink out of that glass this way, like you're going to actually take a drink. And it, like Patty said, if there's something in there, you could take a drink. So what I want you to notice from this is if you look at it this way, then you see where the balance is in the hand. Now, I guarantee that nobody went to grab that cup and had their thumb in this manner. And that would look like this. I don't know if everybody can see. I'm going to turn it around. See where my thumb is here. But my thumb is here. So as I play the instrument, I have that beautiful C shape that we get from that. And as Kato would always say, your thumb is always ahead of your index finger. Well, that's making that beautiful C. And I just lay that C in my instrument neck. I could also get that same idea by doing, and I have my students do this all the time. Do this with your left hand to your own neck, because you are not going to strangle your own neck. Now, in telling a student one time this, I actually did push too hard, demonstrating it on my vocal cords. And so be careful, okay? And be careful with students. So if we take that and we come to the neck of the instrument, or as we would do this, and then we come here, noticing again that I'm not going to position my left hand to play and give music. I can't be stuck in here. So that idea, and I would invite everybody, this week and beyond, when you see your hand in everyday motion, rest, taking a drink, I often go for walks. I looked over at my hand draping off of my body the other day. Here it is. If I turn that over, I've got my giving hand. And Kato talked a lot about this giving hand, being able to give the music to our listeners. And that's another whole nother story about, how to overcome trying to give a gift and have these physical obstacles in the way. And I think all of us have experienced the emotions that come up with that when we cannot express the music because of these, what Kato called these physical obstacles, which get in the way of us singing through our instrument. So if we can, and if you can imagine that you're just always giving. Now, can everybody take their left hand and take the right hand and cradle the left hand as if you were having a little baby bird inside, or you were transferring something to a child that was very precious to them. You did not want to break it. Or what's another good image is a bubble. Imagine trying to transfer a bubble to a child and not pop it or burst it. It's fun for the kids when you do burst it. But if you can imagine encompassing that. Now, as we think of that, take your right hand now and notice that in our everyday activities, we never have a straight line in our hand. And I was thinking about it today for any animal that has a pulse, humans, we don't go at them with straight fingers. What would it be like if someone went to hug you, or you went to grab and caress an animal or be kind with them with straight fingers? It just wouldn't happen. So as humans, we have to think about that. We are very curved, just like our beautiful instruments. Now, if you can go back to that left hand idea, now take the right hand. The index finger is going to be going between the third and the fourth finger. So we're going to take that right hand and go between our fingers and just give a nice kind of jellyfish pulse. So as we do that, think about the possibilities musically right there. We have a whole, everyone is a whole step. We could have B flat, C, D, and E. We could have E flat, F, G, and A. That's all that is. Whether in first position or third position or whatever position you need for your piece. Now, if you can take your ring finger in your right hand and now put it on the other side of the index finger. So you're going to have this. I'm not sure you can see that. So I took from all whole steps here, and I take that ring finger and I bring it over here. Now you should have this beautiful, easy, curved half step between the 1 and the 2. Now put your third finger back where it was, between the index finger and the middle finger. Take the middle finger and go behind your second finger. So now you've made the shape of a half step between 2 and 3. Great for G major, isn't it? E, F sharp, G, and fourth finger A. And notice we are not ever making any special talk about what the fourth finger has to do special because he's a fourth finger. You know, it has no difference in our hand. In everyday activities, we don't think about our fourth finger. We just carry it along with the others. Now, if you can take that middle finger and now make all whole steps again, and take your index finger and bring your third and fourth finger a half step. Now here we are. What key could we be in? Anybody want to pipe in what key we could be in with this pattern? We have a whole step between first and second, a whole step between second and third, and a half step between 3 and 4. Robert, you look like you're gonna.
E flat.
And say it again.
A major.
E flat.
A major, right? And you could have B flat, C, D, and E flat, Robert, yeah. And you could have F sharp, G, A, and B flat, or that dreaded high third finger for A major that they were talking about in Bettina and Jody's video this morning that I watched, A, B, C sharp, D. But we don't think of it and if you turn that to the side and look at it this way, there's the cello left hand, isn't it? Here we would have that. So we're not talking about just for violin, we're talking about cello also can do that. But the thumb, notice, is not ever going to be what I call a slug back here. And that if we do have the thumb as a slug, what we get for our students is what they call the pancake hand. It's kind of flat in here. We can't have a bubble inside there. So I talk about a lot with the left hand, and I show the students this picture of this tube of a wave. And our hand is making this wave. And as we have this in the instrument itself, here's my tube of the wave in here. I could have that surfer being loving this and saying, how awesome is this? And he'd ride through the tube over here. I'm not going to have it like this. And I wouldn't want to be a surfer having to go into a whole block of, no hole in there in between in the tube. So in that way, our left hand, it has all these different shape possibilities. But the beautiful thing is that if we only think of these shapes, and that's what leads me to these stories of what David contributed to me. He told me years ago that as I was studying with him, after I came back from studying with Kato, he said to me, well, in middle school, I realized a lot of the patterns of music. And he said, and I got to spend it was middle school, he said, for him, and he had a whole summer where he just played and played and played. And he said he gained a lot of, made some real great progress in that year, just recognizing the patterns. So as Kato talked to me about the simplicity of the left hand, and she would show us in this way that the left hand comes from the bass joints, that all the motion comes from here, from the main points in our body. And for me, I've kind of adapted that with this left hand being able to go back and forth and make the different shapes, because as we do that, we can then play, and this was what I was saying with the beauty of it, it's easy for students and for us to play in different quote difficult keys. And if we take that idea, if we have, say on the D string, I have E, F, G sharp, A. Well, could I have my student then go to fourth position and play E, F, G, G sharp, A in the same hand pattern, and to point out to them that it's the same hand pattern, that our hand is just going from one area to the next. For me, as a teenager, I was terribly scared of shifting. As I started to explore, well, where could I find these patterns on each string and in each position? Where can I put my 1, 2, 3, 4? And what notes would I be on? And Kato really made a point to me. You need to know what note your left hand is playing. If you don't know what note your left hand is playing, how on earth are you going to give the music, my dear, she would say. So if I can think about that, then to me, it made the whole fingerboard seem so much smaller, so much more familiar, and so much more comfortable. So in thinking about that left hand, and Kato also talked about this back to front motion that happens for us. That as we swing into these interval shapes, and she did have an interval language, I have just kind of modified that into whole steps or half steps or may or my, major third, minor third. And I found that if I have those three, if students can figure out what those shapes are, then we can easily change from A major to A minor, or, you know, and in talking about truly what is an interval, what's a major third, what's a minor third, which in much of my upbringing, I never got any talk about what an interval was or what chord I was playing, which I really, you know, now looking back at it, I craved to know what I was hearing. What patterns was I hearing on tunes on the radio? And could I play that same thing on the violin? And I could, but I didn't merge those two worlds together. Of thinking about, I'm a singer, I sing all the time. I didn't know what I was singing, but if I had taken those tones I was singing and tried to figure them out on the violin, that would have really made a progress in the violin and in both areas to make a more well-rounded musician. So in the left hand with this back to front motion, if you can take that cradle idea in the left hand once more, and take the index finger and make a little back, I'm going to go a little lower here, make a little backward circle and go and take that finger definitely back and make a little straight line. Now, if for the first finger, for the index finger, really all I've got to do is go back and then kind of tuck in. Now, if I want to make a whole step, I can take that left hand and I can take that second finger behind the first and make my half step shape. Or I could take that and make that line of the loop a little bit longer and make a whole step. So we're always talking about horizontally what to do. When I was growing up, I was always taught you press it down onto the string, which I found when I was thinking this horizontal idea, that what was so great is I could know if I was in tune with myself, because I could hear the overtones when I played the third finger. And when I got this left hand, when I finally stopped pressing, I could feel it in my hand, and it felt great here because it was making it, on Sophie Mutter says, I could feel the vibration, you know, through my shoulder of my beautiful gowns. So if you can think about that I loved playing those third fingers because that's when I could really let go. And then it started to feel like, oh, I could do it with the others and to skate into these beautiful intervals, thinking that tragic half step and the jolly whole step. So if we can skate into the left hand, into the intervals with the left hand, we can make more music. And if we, and I say that, you know, the keys to that left hand being soft and movable are a movable thumb and a movable index finger. If we have a light and curved index finger, all the other fingers will follow suit. That first finger, many times we think of him as kind of the boss. He can carry the lightness to all the other fingers. And the fourth finger is the little guy. We don't want to put all the burden on him and press this way. And therefore, what Kato talked about, this weight backwards in the hand, which gives us, again, that giving hand where we started today with that cradle. Okay, so, you know, this, if you can kind of, there's all sorts of fun games that I use with students that branch off from these ideas. And maybe we'll have to have another thing about if people are interested in finding out what those exercises and fun games are. They're very fun just to do with yourself, but it's also fun with a group or with a colleague. And it would be pretty appropriate, I think, for virtual learning too. Okay, so David, I'm going to hand it over to you now, I think, unless anybody, I don't know if people want to wait for questions at the end, or if you have a question about anything I've said that you could address for the group.
Well, Jeananne, you left it at an absolutely beautiful spot for me to talk about why that's so important, why the left hand like that is so important, because the left hand is going to lead. I got to get my bow.
Yeah.
I'm going to jump around a little tiny bit, but I spent the day revisiting so many wonderful memories of lessons with Kato. So Jeananne may have talked a little bit about this, or maybe Bettina, but she showed me how the bow is not divided here like we're taught in the Suzuki school. If I get this right, I'll be able to do this without dropping my bow. She used to call this the middle by balance, or balance point. In some of the books that have been done about her teaching, they find that spot and then they turn it over. I should actually go this way because that's the way the bow goes. Anyway, the shorter, heavier part of the bow corresponds to the heavier, thicker part of the arm, which contains the bicep and the tricep. Thank you, Jeananne. Then when you get to the middle by balance, that takes care of the rest of the arm. Even me with my long arm, I'm a short person, but I have a long arm. So we have the hinge, which Bettina talked about, the shoulder hinge. And when you swing from your back and you let that open up to the middle by balance, stop. Then give. Bend the wrist just a little bit towards your nose. Then, if you want to do the second count, you're going to open the elbow hinge up and out. And like Jeananne just said, you're not going to go like this. You're not going to go like that. It is a follow through. Kato was really big on the fact that you didn't do anything with, this was all a follow through. So I wanted to say something a little bit more about that. Bettina showed it so well last week when you're out at the tip. I think this was hard for me to understand when I first learned the new approach. I learned the new approach with Margaret Tyson Klein, who moved to the San Francisco Bay Area after she studied with Kato, that if you just touch right below where your sleeve is fastened, and the arm opens backwards just a little bit. And like a pendulum, then just the way the arm is built, it'll swing back in and the wrist will fold. A little bit about Margaret. Margaret Tyson joined the San Jose Symphony in 1977. I was already a member. She was also a new first violinist in the San Francisco Ballet Orchestra. And later I found out that Kato regarded her as her new approach daughter, that she had assimilated things to such a degree that, as Kato also said, she could stand on an iceberg at 4 a.m, explain or play. So she sat fourth chair first violin and I could see her very well. And we were playing Symphony number 103 of Haydn, nicknamed The Clock. And if you know that piece, you know that the first movement just, and George Cleave was never known for his modest tempos. So I'm watching with fascination in that 6/8 passage work of the first movement as it flew by, and clearly remember thinking, that woman knows exactly what she's doing and why, and I have to find a way to talk to her because I'm a learned extrovert. I'm not a natural extrovert. So I corralled her at a break and asked if we could talk about teachers. Who had she studied with? And she very enthusiastically and very openly told me about Kato Havas. whom I had never heard of, and the book Stage Fright, which she promised to lend me. So I began studying with Margaret that winter, and I did a week, every week for 6 months, and made plans to go to London in July 1978 when I was 23 years old to have the 12-lesson course with Kato. I want to skip some of this because it's superfluous, but at that time I met Karen Normandia Davy, and I had met other people, so sometimes I had people to go and sightsee with. I'm going to jump way ahead to 1988 when I went back to study with her because I had a bad habit of learning the first movements of major concertos and never going on to the second and third movements. I said, I'm going to go there for a few weeks and I'm just going to work through the Walton Concerto. And we did, section by section by section. And there's a point to this. Let me ramble for just a minute. So I sang it, I clapped it, I mimed it. We talked about softness. We talked about which hinge was going to open, the different bow strokes, down or up. She let me pick my own bowings, of course, because she was never the kind of person that told you what to do. She wanted to encourage you to find your way through it yourself. So I went to that lesson and I said, I'm ready. I just want to play through the entire concerto for you perfectly today. And she said, she took both my hands and she said, my dear, put that instrument down, put that bow down. She said, perfectionism is a disease. You will never play anything perfectly. And the sooner you accept that, the more you will begin to enjoy what you do on a daily basis, wherever you are, orchestra, chamber music, with a student. She said, how about you play a section for me? I thought, well, fair enough. So we started. I used to sing names of the notes, but A, and the underlying pulse. A, C, 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 B, C, B, A, B, A, E, D, 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 C, D, 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 E, D, C, C, D, F, 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 F. I had the flu this week, so I don't have much voice. And she said, very good, that was fine. Now, can you sing it with more meaning? And it's just like this huge light bulb went off in my head and I went, yes, A, C. I didn't even sing it that way. A, C, 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 reach for the C. B, C, B, A, B, A, A, E, D. It's falling back down. C, D. It's reaching for something. D, 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 E, D, C, D, D, F. Why F? Why does it go to F? And we went on from there. I'm sure I played different sections to her all the way through, but I stopped expecting myself to be perfect. That was a huge turning point in my life. The weightless suspended arms were a huge moment. And then Jeananne briefly touched on ha, ho, my, may, and four. Half is a half step. You only have five intervals. Half step, whole step, minor third, major third, and a fourth. Those are the true intervals on one string. If they're on two different strings, you get half step makes a minor sixth. Whole step makes a major sixth. E to D, minor third makes a minor seventh, major seventh, and you get a perfect fourth on one string, and you get an octave when you do the four. And she just wanted you to abbreviate that as much as possible so that you could sing that. She had you sing it so many ways, and into your arm went those intervals. A, C, 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 B, C, B, A, B, A, A, E, D, 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 D. Just little bits like that. I have to look at my notes a little bit. I had such a great time preparing this today. All I did was think about this evening and what a wonderful thing it has been to have Daria and Katie bring us together to talk about this again. So yes, Jeananne.
I had typed in, I think what you were alluding to was the true interval versus an interval shape when you're doing string crossings is what.
Right. What did I say? Intervals?
Half step, you reference it to half step, whole step. Yeah.
Yeah, true interval, interval shape. So, and then I was lucky, Margaret agreed to be my stand partner in Philharmonia Baroque Orchestra. So I had her there for 8 or 9 years. Unfortunately, she passed away of cancer in 1995. And that was the only summer that Kato was denied her visa to come to Angwin, California. And we had her from 1977 to the year 2000. Well, we put together a memorial for Margaret. Patty wrote a beautiful piece about crossing the River Lethe, and it had to do with singing first and creating the pulse. And gradually, one by one, people picked up their, it starts on lu, you sing on lu, pick up your instrument, gradually start playing like a farewell symphony in reverse. And then soon we were all playing together and singing. And then it kind of just gradually evaporated and unraveled. It was a beautiful piece, and I hope we get to do that again.
Mm-hmm.
My aha moment out of that concert was I decided to salute Margaret by playing the Hindemith Trower music, but conduct it. And in the last quick variation, also in 6/8, I missed a shift. I guess I was nervous. I was distracted. It was one of my best friends that had passed away. It goes from E flat, in first position on the C string, to B flat with the fourth finger. All right, hang on. How far was that really? There's that E flat there. And there's the black mark where the B flat is just a little bit higher than that. Here is what I got my knickers in a twist over, this. And Kato gave me an incredible tool, and this is what I want to leave you with because it helped me so much. She said, oh my dear, don't forget, like Jeananne just said, that first finger, it's heavier. That's why it tips back in the giving hand. When you just tip your hand out there and I'm going to have to correct this angle here. You have the giving hand. It's heavier here. She said, in a time like that, you open back even further. This is the host down here. The base joint of the index finger is the host. That fourth finger is the guest. The base joint of the first finger is going to carry the guest up there. But you have to back it up with a big surge of energy. That's a crescendo, right? And I just went, host and guest, host and guest. And I picked up my viola and I just thought about that for a second and I did it and it just went there. And my thumb was open and I felt like I was polishing the string rather than digging into it. I'll never forget that. I love those aha moments. And if anybody else that's studied with Kato has an aha moment, please do share that. Many adventures. Margaret and I also played the Mozart Sinfonia Concerton at the workshop in 1980. I had tried to go over to be Kato's secretary. How foolish was I? How codependent. She agreed to this. I got to London and they deported me because I didn't have a ticket back out. And they said, you can't take away a job from a British citizen. I came back. I had no place to live. I had no job. I had broken off a relationship. I had to start completely from scratch. It's just like when you create the pulse, that's number one. You might flip flop, that might be two. Put yourself in order. So I had to put myself in order pretty quickly. And Margaret and I had very little time to do that, but we wanted to do that at the workshop with the workshop orchestra. And Jeananne, were you there? I later, many, many years later, was at you're muted. I was at a Thanksgiving dinner and somebody said, oh, I was at that workshop one time. These two people got up there and just knocked it out of the ballpark. And I nearly fainted. And she's a musician, a newer friend. I said, that was me and my friend Margaret. You know that all the nailed it, both of us. It's because we had worked out the intervals, we had worked out the bow stroke, we knew which hinge it was going in and why. We had practiced them separately and together, put it together, and it was a great experience. If Jeananne wants to testify to that, I think it was a real high point for me.
Well, I think you also played the Bartok duets was that the same concert?
Well, sometimes Margaret and I would play like a little half recital at Kato's workshops. I fixed up some of the Bartok duos for viola and violin. We also did, I played Telemann Concerto one summer. We did the Johann Gottlieb Ground Concerto for violin and viola. It's C minor. We played many duos. We did the Martin Madrigals. We did both of the Mozart duos. Kato one time said, my dear, that was so fast. And we had a discussion about that. But anyway, I want there to be plenty of time for questions. And just thank you, Jeananne, for explaining so beautifully the left hand that allowed me to sort of segue into the left hand leading the bow strokes. The left hand is feeding like green light energy, boom, into those hinges and opening and shutting that arm. So I'm going to mute myself and turn this over to the coordinators.
Okay, David, I think people would possibly like to hear more about how you select hinges from the music.
Okay. First of all, Kato said, my dear, the first choice is always going to be the middle by balance. You don't want to get stuck up in no man's land. She called being at the tip of the bow like, she called that no man's land. So spiccato is always done at the middle by balance, naturally. I have a paper cut on my finger too, in addition to the flu, but we'll see what I can do. I went through many Kreutzer etudes with her. Maybe you can see this, maybe you can't, but it's that one that goes. So you can go and do it down there, but I think this G is going to go into where this arm opens up here. I'm going to shoot that G with a great deal of energy. And I'm going to look at my arm, G. And then, because the next one's open, I articulate the open string by doing that. G, B, B, D, D, C. And it always comes from back here. It never comes from just the hand. Of course, a 4-count bow is usually 1, 2 in the shoulder socket, 3, 4 in the elbow. Jeananne or Patty the last time mentioned that sometimes a 3-count bow, 1, 2, 3 can be an arc, pum, 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 instead of 1, 2, 3, because that would give a bump on that last quarter note. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Is that helpful?
Right.
Yeah. So you're talking about a lot of things happening in the middle by balance, and then sometimes we have the martelet stroke coming from popping your elbow open and closed.
Exactly.
If
Great.
you want to stay at the tip, yes.
And then counting into the arm, we have the whole note. Maybe we can just go through those. So the whole note 4 counts two into the shoulder.
So if everybody wants to do this together, just take your the pointer finger and put it inside your shirt sleeve here. And bend your wrist towards your nose so that your wrist is nice and soft. And then bring it back out like it's on the string. I guess I'm on the Viola D string right now. So I'm going to go pum, 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 really slow. 1, 2, stop. I'm at the middle by balance, so I went a little bit too far. 1, 2, elbow. 3, 4. 1, 2. This backs up and opens backward. 3, 4. Bettina showed that really beautifully. If you want, I'm not in a very good light, but if you want to go back to that first session and watch her do that.
Yeah, great. And then for a 3-count stroke or a dotted half note, for example.
Yeah, well, either the arc, if it's a quicker pulse, or 1, 2, 3, but without leaning in on the opening of the elbow. 1, 2, 3. Two counts go into the shoulder. 1, 2, 3 goes into the elbow. 1, 2 goes into the shoulder again. 3 closes the elbow.
And I would just address that if it's an odd numbered count, that you're going to have the bigger number in your shoulder hinge, such as Dave was talking about, the 3 count. So you'd have 2 in the shoulder and then 1 in the elbow. And Kato would talk about that 1 in the elbow. You're not going to push with your hand. If you push with your hand, you will hear that. Ugh. But if you take your elbow knob at that point and take your flat hand, this is the only way I could do it, because my hand was taught to push so much. But if I push against that and take away my elbow knob, I've got the exact motion I need for that tip area, for that elbow hinge to actually open, because it feels this is where we feel so vulnerable to open up that elbow hinge and be completely, it felt, when I first was able to do it, I felt completely exposed, like I was naked. And I remember I was in the Lake District workshop at that point, playing Liebesleit. She said, you just need to open up your elbow. And I never could. And then she just put her hand there and she said, make that flat. And then I could open, and then I was like, oh gosh, then guess what? I thought I had it. I thought my arm knew it. But the second I went to do it myself, my old habit, my hand went push and it didn't work. And I skated off the string and said, oops, I better slow that motion down. And then I could stay on the string and stay parallel with the string and with the bridge and the fingerboard.
And just to piggyback on what Jeananne just said, it's that point where people are afraid their bow is going to shake. I've seen it again and again with students. And if you fly up and out, following the curve in the bow,
right, that's it.
Bow is curved for a reason, unless it's a Baroque bow. Look, it has a curve in it. You follow the curve up and out, and that alleviates what Kato called the juddering bow arm.
Yeah, that's what I had forgotten to say, that that we want to swing out and up, and we're riding that arc of the swing to lead to the next upstroke, which is a beautiful thing when you're trying to make that nice and smooth. But remember, at that point, if you're going to be riding the arc of what I call the crescent moon, the inside of the moon you're tracing, if you're going to be riding that curve, you've got to go to the outside. And if you're sweeping across there, that opens up the shoulder hinge, which was a very difficult thing to do, because at the tip, you really want to push the up bow with your hand. If the arm can swing that back and sweep back this way, Kato would call that foreshortening your arm, which I was like, well, what the heck is that? I don't know what that word means. But if I think about it sweeping this way, and then she would show this beautiful fold all the way up and say, see, I can go all the way to the frog with that beautiful sweep. And she would this would come, she was so small that her arm looked like it was all tucked inside of her.
A question that I think everybody could probably benefit from, the clarification of why we use our index, and Patty also mentioned using the actual finger of, but we're trying to get our pulse into those hinges using the index finger. But you can elaborate.
I want to make sure that with my voice, I'm actually sending the name of the note into that hinge. Like if I'm going C 2 counts, D 2 counts, C, I have to get at the frog here, C, C, D, D. And I'm giving myself a lesson. I'm reassuring that arm that it's going to know where to go. C, C, stop, give, D, D, stop, give. And Jeananne demonstrated this really beautifully just a minute ago. When you're out and up, it naturally wants to come back. So there is no bow change at the tip.
I often start, for some people, it works really well to actually start their stroke at the tip rather than having them encounter the awkwardness of opening the elbow at the very beginning. Start with their elbow extended. And I often say to my students, you know, kind of in front of your tummy, because they want to have it out to the side. So starting at the tip, and you guys can try this on your instrument. So if you just go and rest your bow at the tip. And then, I guess my shirt's kind of dark, can't see that. But then, and then swing in this way. So I'm opening this and following through by folding the arm. Sometimes it's just a little easier to encompass the curve of that stroke from the tip.
And so important to make sure that our eyes are not doing this with the instrument yet, that you are teaching your arm what the motion is. We're teaching our bodies what the motion is then, and what to do with our bodies. And then we can incorporate the violin and do what my teachers when I was little would always say, darling, pretty soon the instrument is going to feel so natural for you. It's going to just feel like part of your body. Well, it never did until I was balancing it. When I was holding it, I could never feel like it felt like this thing on my body. But as I'm balanced with it, then I can move with it also. Not that the violin's going to be going all over the place. It has to stay quite steady like a boat on water. But I can still have that balance and then still be able to move.
And I wanted to also add, related to Dejanna's question about why we use our fingers and why we talk to our bodies. That's not exactly your question, but that's what I'm going to talk about. The idea that we teach ourselves with as many different perspectives as we can, so that we're not always looking at, for example, if you put your instrument up and you look down your string like this, you get a false idea of how long it is. And so if you actually look at it this way and measure how far is it from first finger to third finger on the string, and then show yourself it's that big. It's not this indeterminate length from here to here, because our eyes are giving us one perspective, which isn't necessarily the most useful. So the idea of using a finger to activate the hinge, using the voice to activate the fingers, using the Pacific pulse to activate my voice is all part of Kato's great ideas.
Do we want to address some of the questions? As I see a question that I could answer that Harry posed. Or does the moderator do that? Should I just jump in?
Yes, please go ahead. And
Okay.
also, there was kind of a request for you to go over some of the exercises you do with your students. If we have time, that would be great.
Okay, and that may, what I was saying, that may be a whole nother session that we want to do. But I want to make sure I address what Harry was asking. Do you ever try to hold your instrument, balance it without holding the instrument with your neck or holding it up? And I think what he's talking about is this, that you would try to hold it with just your jaw. Is Harry still here? He could unmute. So
But in a relaxed way, not gripping.
right. So Kato would answer that question this way. Why would you ever do anything that you wouldn't actually need in playing?
Mhm.
We don't play. She said there was never a piece that was written like this. There's a piece that's written with, you can have open strings, yes, but really open strings, then you're going to go to the body of the instrument, which as we swing that to our shoulder and get that sitting there, that we're going this way. We're not necessarily having to figure out that, here's where in the Suzuki method, they do teach that. The weightiness of the instrument right from the beginning. I came from Suzuki method, they'll spend the first year bringing the violin out here. And then, and there are many wonderful things about the Suzuki method, don't get me wrong. But if I swing this here, right away, I'm having to hold the instrument, whether I'm at the body or not. And most of the time, they tell them to hold the neck. Now, Kato would describe that as the goose in the market. The gypsies would have the goose. They'd put the fish down the goose's neck and they'd shake the neck to steal fish. Now, if we go from the body here or the neck, if I do it from the neck, the violin's right away heavy. I turn it over and oh my God, I have a strain here in my arm. And then they say, now get it to your shoulder. So my thought to my students is, and little kids love this, your parents never picked you up by the neck. They never do. They pick you up by the shoulders and then they bring you up or to the table or to the bed. But this is so detrimental right away for beginners to have that go like that. And then the balance is already off. If we can come here from the front of our body and swing that up into that collarbone area, we're right on our shoulder, and that's what we need. So we don't necessarily need to practice holding the violin. And that's how I view that without the left hand.
And Harry, just to follow up on that, when we're alive in this world, we're always moving. We're always balancing from one place to the next. We're always breathing and our lungs are expanding or contracting. We're always moving. And playing the viola is the same thing. What we want to find is ways to balance, to shift moment by moment, and to be the most efficient balance that we can possibly be in service of the music. So what Jeananne was talking about, standing and learning how to stand with the instrument like this for a certain amount of time, maybe we could all do push-ups or something, but that's not really going to help us play the violin or the viola, excuse me.
Mm-hmm. Yehudi Menuhin talked about that too, and the balances and his stretches and the yoga stretches that he found that you don't want to hold the violin just like in yoga. You still have to breathe. You still have to have some movement, which in that holding a pose would be to incorporate the breath and in our case, the pulse, right? I don't know, Daria and Katie, if you want me to go into anything in the left hand, or if we want to.
Yeah, I think that we have addressed whatever is in the chat, but I may be not seeing everything. So I think we do have a little bit of time if you want to go ahead, if people have patience to hear. And then if you have other questions, please go ahead and put them in the chat.
I don't know if somebody has a specific question. That's what I want to address if we're,
Okay.
does anyone have a specific thing that they want to? I mean, I would relate it to the left-hand shapes.
Yeah, she says, exercises you do with your students for left hand, but Deanna, do you want to speak up if you have questions?
I mean, I'm understanding we don't have too much time, but if you can just demonstrate one exercise that you do with your students and that you found effective even in distant learning.
So I'll talk to you about, this interval shape thing. If we come from here, which is that flip-flop exercise Kato talks about in her books, and imagine your arms parallel. So here we're really thinking for the viola, you can really see this easily on Zoom, that from your shoulder to your upper arm would be your most balanced string on the viola G, and for us violinists on D, and then our arm comes up in that spot. So again, if you could think of that your arms are going to be like with a little floaties, you're in the bathtub or the pool, and you're resting your arms on top of the water. So as you think about those shapes that we were talking about in the left hand, I call this the choose exercise. I just flip this over and I make sure I have no whole steps. This is what I call the choose none. So I go choose and I flip it over and I have none. I have all whole steps. I flip it back. I bring gently together, kind of rubbing shoulders, if you will, between that first and second finger, not holding that. Remember, if I make that straight, when I turn it over, I'm going to have a claw that's going to try to give music. That can't make music. It can make notes. It can't make music. But if I just touch those together, and this is what I call the choose one, I flip it over and I've got like the B and the C or the E and the F. Half step between 1 and 2. So I call that a choose one because the 1 carries that half step to 2, and then I have all the others whole steps. So I flip it over again, I have 2 and 3, and I have a choose 2. And notice that the voice is directing everything. That's really something we didn't touch upon at all. The voice, we have to lead the music, not the outside in. It's always we're giving from inside out if we're giving genuinely. And so I have the choose 2. And then if I have a half step between 3 and 4, that's what I say, choose 3. And notice that I'm just flipping this back. And this is a real, when we're thinking about that left hand and the thumb, if my thumb I'm going to make sure my thumb is movable. And so therefore, I have that C shape. When I go into balance and spread my hand for the 4th finger, in that horizontal way of riding the string, I have an L shape. And that's really the only time we kind of have a little bit of a straight line, but still I have this my little index finger saying, I'm here. I'm gonna be curved and I'm gonna go into the next note. So if so my first finger is gonna flip back. And then I'm gonna come back to front motion, back into that. Kato would have me practice, I'll think if I remember. She would have me do that audible slide because I was so used to pressing down on the string in a vertical way. She said, you need to make sure your hand can slide. And so see if I take that second finger back to front, I'm making that whole step between B and C. If I do here and I just fall off the first finger knuckle, I'm like sliding down, then I get that beautiful half step. If we have that back and forth, B, C, B, C, she would say, make sure you re-articulate the first finger. Make sure he's soft so you could do this. And this is really frowned upon of lifting, quote, lifting that finger. But it all depends on the speed and the context of whatever you're playing. Of course, if it's playing fast, you don't have time to flip that back and flip it back. You're gonna still, though, make sure that you are pushing into the string so that it doesn't push down. But remember that just like we walk, and I talk about the left hand, the fingers are like our legs. We're walking or dancing intervals over here. But if we were continuously walking, one foot would set, the next one starts to prep for the next step, which is how we can think about that left hand, that in the interval shapes, we're prepping for the next thing. We're not gonna just land somewhere, unless it's the end of the piece or the end of the phrase. We might soften there and kind of cuddle. Kato would say, cuddle that neck so much, but we would cuddle the note and finish the phrase that way. And that also leads into the left hand of David, of the articulation, and the phrasing can happen so much in the left hand.
Thank you so much.
Wendy, oh, sorry. Wendy has brought up again about the first finger swinging back and opening. And I remember that we were talking about this with Bettina and Jody. Obviously, if you are using the first finger, it's not open out that much. But do you want to take that on, Jeananne? Just describe when would the first finger open completely back and when would it not?
I teach it in this way. So if we're going to have the first and second and third finger, and we're going to go back like in a minor third example for like G to E, that my thumb would be here making that C shape. But if I need, so I think of that, like David was talking about the host, the first finger being the host, that the weight is really there in the first finger. But if I'm going to be going back and forth or doing a trill between 3 and 4, then my thumb is going to go forward. And then the host becomes the other partner in the relationship. The second finger is now the host. So the weight is there and the first finger is light, ready to come back, you know, a whole step back or a whole step forward. So that as I'm going in, and I hope that explains it, that as I'm going to go into fourth finger, this is going to come forward, caressing the side of the neck. And that's where that tube idea of the wave is so important, because now all my fingers are curved like the falling of a wave. And there's my tube. If the student can't see the palm of their hand, they're not having the neck balanced like we would do here. It would be like this. Kato described this as, well, darling, if you didn't have the gap there, look at how long your finger would be. And that's too long to reach any string. But if I bring that down and I have my gap here, then I'm balanced for everything. And that leads me to something else too that somebody else was talking about. With the string being horizontal, if I'm doing it, if I think about that string being horizontal, parallel to the ground for us like this, here's our string. Well, if I do the giving hand, isn't that exactly in line with a parallel to the ground? If I do it this way, like is traditionally taught, that we're going to have the wrist back, then see what where in that is a horizontal line of a string. That's more vertical, isn't it? If I go this way, I'm more parallel, more horizontal in this way. So the fourth finger or the thumb is always balancing our hand, and by the way, it does it every day in every motion in our lives. We just don't think about where our thumb is. So again, I would invite you all to do Michelle's idea. Check out what your thumb looks like when you least are thinking about your thumb, or playing the violin or playing the viola.
Wonderful. Okay, I think we are coming to the end of our time. If there are issues that arise or questions that people have in the meantime, I'm happy to pass you along to our presenters or answer questions myself if I can. And you can email us at the Viola Society, which you can, if you forget, you can look up Northern California Viola Society and you'll find some email contacts on the website. but also it's just norcalviola@gmail.com, I think is our email. So we have coming up, we're right in the middle of our composition panel assessing viola compositions for the Young Violist competition, and we are beginning to accept some applications for the viola competition, which is open to violists 19 years old and under who are pre-college, and that deadline is January 5th. And our competition will be held in some form online. I believe it's the 7th of March. I don't have all these dates memorized yet in my brain, but I want to take this time to thank profusely our wonderful presenters today, Jeananne and David and Patty, who helped elucidate more and more aspects and more details of the teachings of Kato Havas. And it's been fantastic hour and a half, and we really, really appreciate your time and your preparation. I know is considerable. And then for those of you who are American String Teacher Association members, this will be presented, and also Patty's hour will be presented during that conference, which is virtual in early March.
Also in early March, Young Violists Competition Finals is March 7th, Sunday at 2 o'clock.
Yes, and we're still figuring out exactly how that will be, but it'll be online that day in one form or another. Thank you, everybody.
So much,
Thank
Daria.
you,
Thank you
everyone.
so much, Katie. This is a great group. You guys are doing amazing work.
Hey,
Thanks.
Michelle. Michelle.
Oh, Michelle.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Oh man. Thank you so much, Jeananne. That's so amazing.
I
Thank
was
you for
looking
showing me that. Oh my goodness.
looking